sharing industry and development and all the rest of it. We remain isolated. We do not make peace with India. India does not make peace with us. We still believe that we have a say in making the government in Kabul. We do not make any regional kind of peace. And so it was an opportunity. And I think the biggest thing that we missed out on was globalization. We never took part. I mean, this was the start of the call phone centers in India, the IT revolutions in these third world countries, etc., and we were never a part of that. So the end of the Cold War sort of passed us by in a way where we were totally preoccupied with our own internal politics and dynamics and refused to accept. The second really important point in historical moment, I think, was 9/11. Now, 9/11 should have been a wake-up call to all states that this now, what Al-Qaeda did in the United States on September the 11th really spelt the end of using terrorist groups or allowing terrorist groups to exploit states or parties' foreign policy. Now, what the message was clearly that, you can know, and the message I think to Pakistan, which should have been imbibed, that Pakistan can no longer use non-state actors, extremist groups like Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed and all these groups to exploit foreign policy. We were doing it throughout the 90s in Kashmir. The Americans turned a blind eye. It was not a big deal. If you remember, the conflict in Kashmir in the mid-90s was heavily fueled by jihadi groups from Punjab and trained, by the military with the connivance of the political leadership in the country at that time. There was no issue. But I think what 9/11 raised was, obviously, and that these groups were really not acceptable. But what do we see after 9/11? That we actually go ahead and help revive the Taliban movement in 2003. We are deeply involved with that. On the Kashmir front, there's relative peace because Musharraf, after Kargil and after the beating that we got in Kargil, decides to go for, after a long hiatus, decides to go for a peace effort with India. But certainly what happens is that and then the American attack in Afghanistan, the revival of the Taliban leads to the Americans becoming more and more of an occupation army, having to attack the Pashtun South and the East, and you get more and more involvement of Pakistani groups fighting with the Afghan Taliban. So 9/11, instead of being this kind of wake-up call that, look, these extremist groups now can no longer be used. And if you remember, we nearly went to war with India in 2001 because these groups attacked the Indian Parliament, first the Kashmir Parliament, then the Indian Parliament. And it was an incident very similar to what happened in Mumbai 2 years ago. The fact that these groups are still allowed to be nurtured on Pakistani soil is, I think, the biggest failure to grasp the message of 9/11. And lastly, our whole national security paradigm remains bogged down in essentially what is the Cold War. That, we have a national security crisis. India is the enemy on our border. We have to prepare for that, whether it's 50 nuclear weapons or 110 nuclear weapons. We have to try and outdo India on every front as far as the military balance is concerned. We don't have to outdo India in education, in health, in economic development, in trade, in all these other things. And I think that national security paradigm is completely trapped at the moment in a period which ended 20 years ago, and we have not been able to get out of. And that really needs thinking. It needs thinking by the politicians. It needs thinking by the military. Zahid raised this point. I mean, are we going to be able to, wake up to this before it is too late? Clearly, the extremists are not going to do it for us. We need, civil society needs to, and civil society needs to push for this change of thinking by our political and military elite. Otherwise, we're not going anywhere. And I'm also very firmly saying, we should not sort of douse ourselves in a kind of defeatism. But I think we have to make an effort, and that's certainly something I try and do in my books, is to make an effort to try and explain that, look, there is a different narrative. This national security paradigm that we have got bogged down with since 47 is really now completely out of date and has no relevance to our lives, and is in fact now endangering the state of Pakistan. Thank you very much.
It's been very heartening to sit before such a large audience. It's been a perfect audience for us, and I thank everyone here, the speakers, Parvez Hudboy, Naseem Zahra, Zahid Hussain, and Ahmed Rashid. Thank you very much.